just wanted first to welcome you to this session. So we'll be talking about DIY precautions. We'll be talking about aerosol-based transmissions, or the airborne transmission. And we'll talk also, not only talk, we'll also showcase the making of units, and Amanda will talk about that later on, so I will let her present this. And Sam will talk in a minute or so of an international coalition, collaboration, cooperation, the way you want to call it, to make sure that people can make and prepare their own airborne precautions done in a proper way, a good way, and in a cost-effective way as well. So how we can do that correctly with the proper components, proper measures, and also in a way that can be acceptable for their school trustees, for their authorities, and that's another challenge as well that we need to face sometimes. So maybe Sam, you wanted to add, but we'll have 3 portions in the presentation. Just wanted to highlight that before I come back to you, Sam. So first one, we'll have presentations from some speakers, and then we'll have a panel which will talk about their experience, and the final portion will be an open Q&A for everybody. You can ask questions all the time, anytime during the presentations in the chat. They might be responded right away, or they might be responded as well as at the end with the live Q&A. Okay, so Sam, I will let you take it from here. Without further ado, we've waited all a bit, and everybody has waited, so we can start right away. We have somewhat an hour bit less in front of us.
Okay. How long have I got right now, Stephane?
Oh, it's every presentation at the beginning it were to be about 5 minutes, 6 minutes. Right. So it's just the range we have. So plus or minus. It's not an exact science, it's just an approximate number.
Okay, so I'm going. I'm away. Lovely. Thank you very much for coming, everybody. This Airborne Precautions DIY movement was born out of the first conversations that I was having when I joined the World Health Network, and we were talking a lot about the narrative that we wanted to to create out there in the wider world, and the narrative that we were going up against, which was basically that everybody has forgotten about the pandemic and that it's finished, and we can stop worrying about it. And what we thought was that the sight in national newspapers or national media of groups of people getting together to protect themselves, where governments were often failing to protect them, would be a very powerful sight, and it would be a very effective challenge to that narrative. We were also talking about leadership, because we were talking about the many different groups that the World Health Network is made up of, and what we can do for them, what we can do for the different groups in the different countries, in the different cities who are trying to help to protect people from this virus. And this all coalesced in our heads around this idea of these DIY air filters, because we knew that it was possible to make them to be very effective, to be cheap, and to be long-lasting, and that it was a way of giving the different groups in the World Health Network a tool, weapon to be able to go out in their communities and make a real difference. I mean, we were thinking about the options that different people, different groups had at the time to make a difference, and the options were poor, really. I mean, what can we do? We can make noise on social media. Fine, we can argue with people on social media. We can argue with our families. That's not very nice. No one's enjoyed doing that. We can, with our friends, we can try and set a good example. Fine, we can wear our masks properly. We can open windows, but still, it's very individual, and it's not. the opportunities for leadership weren't as good as we wanted them to be. So these filters that we've designed, all of a sudden mean that people have the option to fundraise, to build filters themselves, to go and speak to businesses and spaces in their neighborhoods, to get off Twitter and to get off and to go into neighborhoods and lead properly. We thought that the groups in the World Health Organization would appreciate that possibility if we could only provide them with the filters. So our engineers, our international team of engineers, we have Amanda and Alex.
Whoops, I think we've lost Sam. So we'll just wait a second or two. Krystal, I saw you're arriving, so great to see you there. While Sam is trying to joining the room, the room back in the room, just want to let you know, Krystal, that we'll have after Sam will have finished, we'll have Amanda talking, and then it will be your turn just before Alex. Okay, Sam is not. I just want to see if he's in the room somewhere.
Maybe I'll just get started building while we're waiting for him to come back.
Yeah.
So Sam was speaking about the DIY filters, and that's kind of a thing that has been very empowering for people in the community to be able to build these accessible air purifiers that are really easy to make, and I'll show you how easy they are to make. So what, part of what our team has been working on is the idea of taking a design that was very popular in the United States.
Sam is back. So sorry, we've lost you, Sam. Thank you, Amanda.
I got thrown out of the room and whizzed into another one. I'm back anyway.
Yes, sorry. I think we have some issue with the. Okay, sorry, Amanda, I cut you.
Right.
Anyway,
just where I was talking about leadership, wasn't I? And now that we have a tool to allow for more efficient, more effective leadership. Good. The other thing that this tool allows our groups to do is to make better contacts with civil society in their countries. So if we could approach trade union groups, for example, we could approach religious groups, education groups, consumer rights organizations, all sorts of different associations, to say, look, we've got this tool to help make your spaces safe. The unions, always are very interested in health and safety, the health of their members and their families, and it's an opportunity for them to campaign around that. Churches and mosques and other religious groups very interested in their space where they worship, but also their communities and trying to do good within their communities. Schools are spaces in their own right where we want to see airborne protections, but they're also full of young leaders, young adolescent leaders who have that chance now to build these boxes and go out into their communities and offer the boxes around. Fundraising as well. These civil society groups can be fantastic for fundraising. So that's leadership. The other thing that was in our mind was teaching. Now, I'm a primary school teacher. I'm also a secondary school teacher and an adult teacher in a few different lifetimes of teaching. And when I go into my supermarket in Spain, we have still, a year and a half into the pandemic, a bottle of soap or gel, and there's no CO2 monitor, so we don't know what the air quality is like in the supermarket. And that's the same all over Spain, where in many, many places where I go. We are starting to get through. The message is starting to get there, but painfully slowly. And when I think about teaching, I go back to the classroom. I think, look, if we want to teach people about airborne transmission, and they've been told at the start of the pandemic that transmission wasn't airborne, and they've been told when they were nervous and when things were traumatic, when people literally were dropping all around us, that transmission wasn't airborne. The thing that you get told first and the thing you get told when you're under pressure are the things that they make more of an impact in our brains. This is what they've taught me as a teacher. And so we're trying to unlearn some pretty powerful learning. And I go back to the classroom. Now, I would never teach any maths or anything really without trying to give the kids a chance to do what I've been teaching them. Now, if I'm trying to teach them about a battle, it's a bit hard for them to do it. But I would at least try and give them a chance to observe it, to make connections to it, to feel it in a real way. And the presence of these boxes, these filters around our shared indoor spaces would go a long way to helping people see real mitigation and to see how the virus spreads and B, how to protect themselves. The one, some of the stories that I have, there's one about my parents-in-law's village in Spain, where there was a butcher's shop and the butcher put up, he'd obviously been reading online or something, he put up a CO2 monitor in his butcher's shop, and he whenever it beeped, when the measure went too high, he threw 2 or 3 things out of the door and opened all the windows. And the number of conversations that started in that village, it was hundreds. He basically set an example to the whole village, and he challenged what people thought about transmission. He showed them. Another microphone is in their jeans pocket, I think. The other example is recently with my parents in a hotel in Mallorca, where they had CO2 monitors up all around the hotel. And they're from England, and it was the first time they'd seen a CO2 monitor. And watching it go from green to orange and saying, "Oh, it's the air quality, it's in the air," was much better teaching for them than the year and a half that I've spent trying to talk to them. And we think that these boxes being around our communities will be fantastic teaching. And so I think, I want to finish there, really. The last thing to finish on is there might be a few people who are here who are just wondering, are we skirting around the edges of the issue here? We're here to end the pandemic, aren't we? Why are we building filter boxes when what the change we want is on a much larger scale? And to that, I have to say no. If the key, or one of the keys to ending this pandemic, is for governments, but people as well, to learn how this spreads, to get these proper mitigations into our spaces, especially our crowded, badly ventilated spaces where super spreader events have happened for the last year and a half. And if we get to the bottom of stopping, or at least reducing these super spreader events through these boxes, or through other measures if needs be, then we are halfway there to ending the pandemic. This is a big part of the puzzle for our group anyway. And on that, I think I'll sign off and hand back to Stephane.
Thank you very much, Sam. Great insights and important topic. And objectives as well, as you said it correctly. So Amanda, it will be your turn. But just before, I just want to welcome Chia, Chen, Wang. So you just so you'll be speaking just after Amanda. Just want to let you know, and I will introduce you. So Amanda, a long-time member of the indoor air quality group at WHN. So I will let you introduce and continue what you started essentially 5 minutes ago.
Great. And yeah, I think it builds really well into what Sam was talking about in terms of that these seem like small solutions, but they're actually part of a bigger thing. And I mean, air quality is something that we all need to be paying attention to for a lot of different reasons. So yeah, these filters are very easy to make. They're affordable. And part of the thing that we were doing with our group is trying to find a way to translate that easy, like go to the store, you can buy lots of different components, into other places. So, the original design, you may have seen it kind of on the internet, is called the Corsi Rosenthal box, the Comparetto Cube, and it's made of furnace filters and a box fan. So pretty simple. some tape, and you actually use the box that the fan comes in. And so our challenge was to say, box fans are not available everywhere. And so what can we do to make sure that places that have different components can still make these accessible options? And that's what our team has been really working on. And so we've actually designed one with a circular fan that we've tested, and we know it does a very good job of pulling particles out of the air. So that's good for dust and pollution and COVID. So I'm basically going to be making one of these throughout the session, and we can check in and see where we're at, just to show that it really is super easy. And these solutions they clean the air very effectively, surprisingly so for how much they cost. And so I'll just be doing that throughout the session. And again, it's just these furnace filters and a fan and some cardboard, and that's basically it.
Thank
I'm just
you
going to
very
mute
much.
myself so you don't hear tape ripping while other people are talking.
But we will see you. We continue to see you. Depending on if there are slides to be presented, you will be there right up above or on the side as you were where you were earlier. So thank you very much, Amanda. So great. And we'll have on top of this live making of those units, so you'll see that we're talking about minutes, not hours to make them. So you will also have new designs presented coming from the European Union in just a couple of minutes in the second half of the presentations. So now I'm pleased to just to welcome Dr. Chia Wang, which is the director of the Aerosol Science Research Center at the University of Sun Yat-sen in Taiwan. So Dr. Wang, I let you, without further ado, just go ahead. If you want to share, I have no time to let you know. If you need to share your screen, you just go up on the right beside the small gear, and between, in fact, the small gear and the mute button, you'll click on this square rectangle, and you'll be able to choose what screen you want to share with us, and it will show up above where Amanda was just a minute ago. Perfect. Oh, you're still on mute. And if you're able, you can also put it in presentation mode, so it will be a bit bigger because our screen is a bit small. It's not a full screen, so it will just help if you can. We still don't hear you. Are you able to unmute? It's still not working. We no more see your screen as well. Okay, what we can do is retry in a couple minutes. I know you stayed awake for long hours. It's about 4 something a.m. On your side of the Pacific, so it's really late. Really appreciate what you're doing. So okay, we'll retry in a couple minutes, and in the meantime, I will present Krystal Pollitt from Yale University. She will talk about one of the reasons why we need to take care of and having airborne precautions and take care of the particles that are. Okay, so you have shared your screen, so I'll let you go right away. Go ahead and just with your presentation. Thanks, Krystal.
All right, thanks so much. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, excellent. So I might step ahead of myself based on what Alex and Chia might be sharing, but I'll send some reasons on why are we building these DIY units and how effective are they? All right, great. So we know that airborne transmission is a relevant route for considering SARS-CoV-2 transmission, an important one. So what I've shown here is just how they would act within a room. So having them within a room is an effective means for then filtering out these virus-laden aerosols. So we have a filter that's attached onto a box fan, just as Amanda is beautifully building. I put a simpler model here with just a single filter attached onto a box fan. We're using these furnace filters that she mentions that can be purchased from a variety of different places. They have a MERV rating that is then associated with a differential level of filtration efficiency here. So key thing to note is that they are going to be effective in filtering all sizes, even those smaller than 0.3 microns. And Alex is going to elaborate on this more when he speaks. But what I've shown here is that the rating of that MERV filter that you put into your DIY designed unit is going to have a different level of filtration depending on that number there. So as you can see here, this is the size of the particles. We have lots of different sizes of particles or aerosols that the virus can be attached to, and then the filtration efficiency. And you can see as you increase these numbers, these are all the different MERV rated filters, they're going to have increasing levels of filtration. So just to show you some results that they work, if this goes to the next slide. There we go. This is just a time course of sampling particles in the air, showing the difference between when an air cleaner is in operation and when it is not. So you have time that it's measuring continuously, the particle levels in the air that's on the y-axis here. The blue line is when there are no air cleaners in operation, and then the red is when you have an air cleaner turned on. And you can see this very effective ability to filter out particles by using an air cleaner device. And I've listed this reference here that you can get more information on the study. So this all fits into a much larger ventilation scheme of one component on how we can address effective ventilation and filtration within an indoor environment. And I know this is really a lot here, but I wanted to just emphasize that this is one component of a lot of things that you can do to enhance ventilation within your space. So it's important to understand the type of ventilation you have there. If it's related to your building, you have an HVAC system, or you don't, where it's naturally ventilated. Ways that you can follow. Again, the link here is in the bottom to go through it in more detail. The light colored boxes here are for spaces that have an HVAC system with mechanical ventilation, and the darker blue is where places that don't. And within this flow diagram, I've put in here exactly where the air cleaner fits in. So you can see that it's one element of the bigger picture. And consequently, it's also a bigger picture in all of our infectious control measures that we have. And it's important to remember that we need to layer on all the different strategies that we have in place to have the most effective means of reducing the risk of transmission. So all the way from masks, physical distancing, the use of ventilation filtration from being outside to having more just airflow, and also filtration of aerosols. And this can include using the existing building systems, opening windows or clean air cleaners, and also then individual controls as well, from hand washing and surface disinfection. So with that, I'll stop. And if there are any questions, I'd be happy to answer them later.
Okay, so you need to stop sharing, Krystal. Thank you very much. Thanks very much for the presentation. I've just been validating with Chia that now everything looks fine, and she will be able to continue or start her presentation. Thanks very much, Krystal, another time. And Chia, you can go ahead with sharing your presentation as you did earlier.
Okay. Okay. Can everyone hear me now?
This is all good.
Okay, good. Okay, thanks for Stephen for the invitation. I would like to share with you some of the mechanism about the airborne transmission of virus-laden aerosols. As we all know that aerosols can be produced by an infected person that contain viruses. Although the conventional size cutoff has been set to smaller than 5 micron, a more appropriate size should really be updated to to be smaller than 100 micron due to their aerodynamic properties and also the virus load and other characteristics of virus-laden aerosol crucially depend on many anatomical, aerodynamic, and environmental factors. So although it was thought previously that the formal and droplet transmission were mainly responsible for the pandemic, but the increasing evidence has pointed out that airborne transmission is the major mechanism responsible for spreading this COVID-19, both in the short and the long ranges. On the other hand, for transmission has actually been proved of low risk, so it is not the main transmission mode. The recent epidemiological studies show that the COVID-19 pandemic is actually driven by super spreading event, with about 5 to 20% of infected individual account for 80 to 90% of secondary infection for SARS-CoV-2. Here are just some of the studies that show this fact.
Yeah, your slides aren't presented. We just see your overview slide. Here, there we go.
Probably I couldn't use the slideshow, otherwise it stopped showing. Can you see now the slide?
Now you're on slide 6.
Yeah,
or,
okay.
2.
So maybe I show in this mode so that it can run smoothly. If that is okay.
I think it's better than that you can show them than losing them like earlier. So if you can make it a bit bigger on the Zoom, maybe.
Okay,
but I would say that it's better that you continue and you're just giving more insights on what you have, especially what's small on the screen. But for the rest, I think it's making it, so it's fine.
Okay.
Good. That I think it's better than losing it, because we're in a new platform, and I'm just apologizing for everybody, because this is a new platform. It's still improving, giving a lot of possibilities, but sometimes we struggle with a couple of items. So go ahead, Chia. Thanks very much.
Technical issues. Okay, so here are just some slides I just shared earlier. Yeah. Okay. So I will continue. So actually, most of the epidemiological analysis or airflow model simulation experiments and some modeling of super spreading event all point to airborne transmission as the most likely mode of transmission in many different environmental settings, like in restaurants, in meatpacking plants, on the cruise ship, or in some chore practice. And as you can see, I show some of the example here. They are all far away from the currently set social distancing. Okay, and the conventional droplet and the formite transmission has failed to explain the super spreading event. And this fact actually strongly point out that current precautionary measures are not sufficient to protect us against airborne transmission. So there are several phases involved in airborne transmission of viruses. The first stage is the virus-laden aerosol have to be generated by an infected individual, and it really depends on the generation size, the corresponding generation mechanism, and also it will result into different size distribution of the exhaled aerosol and also the number of variants in the aerosols, because it depends on the severity of the infected individual. And once the virus-laden aerosols are generated and released into the environment, we are into the second stage. At this stage, virus-laden aerosol has to be transported in the environment, and the settling velocity, the residence time, and also the persistence of the virus in the aerosol, because they actually decay over time. So it is a competing process. And a lot of environmental factors such as the temperature, the humidity, the airflow and ventilation, or even the solar radiation can play important role in these processes. And eventually, the virus aerosol can be inhaled by a potential host. So once these aerosols are inhaled by a host, they can travel in a size-dependent manner. So it really depends on the size to determine how deep they can go and whether they can initiate infection successfully. Okay, so the I probably don't have time to go too deep into the technical details, but the size of the aerosol matters a lot. It determines the terminal settling velocity and or how long they can stay floated in the air, and under the influence of wind speed or ventilation, they can travel far away from the social distance currently set by most governments, and also they would determine how deep they can reach. So for usually for smaller aerosol, they can get down to the lower respiratory tract, even the bronchiolar or alveolar regions. Okay, so when we dig into the literatures, we found that it's not just COVID-19 caused by SARS-CoV-2 that is airborne. Actually, most of the respiratory viruses has shown different evidence of airborne transmission, including SARS-CoV-2, MERS-CoV-2, and influenza, rhinovirus, and measles. So it is really time for us to upgrade the current paradigm of this disease control by including the aerosol precautions. And we must pay more attention to the air we breathe. So here are just a few hints. I think Alex will talk more in details later. So wearing universal masking or wearing mask with fit remains an effective way in reducing airborne transmission. And of course, there are different types of mask, and the N95 shows the highest filtration efficiency in blocking the infectious SARS-CoV-2. But all masks offer some kind of protection. Okay, and also the risk of indoor airborne transmission is much higher than the outdoor environment. So we need to pay more attention to reducing the airborne transmission in the indoor environment. So that means we have to pay attention to the airflow direction and pattern, the types of ventilation that we choose for our rooms or our buildings or schools. And also it would be helpful to implement the air filtration or the UV disinfection. For example, the portable air cleaner with HEPA filter that Alex will also address later, and upper room UV disinfection can also help. And it is also helpful to use carbon dioxide monitoring system to determine whether a specific room it has sufficient ventilation. Okay, and finally, I would like to share with you that we have prepared a set of explainer comics to help the general public and for students to get some key ideas about airborne transmission. I know that some of you are school teachers, so with the help of global volunteers, we have already We have now 20 languages that is free, available for download with either PPT or PDF regions. Yeah, just I think it is really important for most people, more people to understand and build connections to protect themselves. So through this pandemic, we came to realize that we are actually much more connected, and it really takes the collective efforts to make the air cleaner and also make everyone healthier. Okay, so here is my presentation to share. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chia. Really great presentation, and it's exactly going a direction as Sam said earlier. Collective effort is important. I finished quickly on talking about Krystal earlier. She's also an important member of our indoor air quality task force at the WHN. I just don't want to miss to say that. So thank you, Krystal, for your work there.
Thank
Now
you.
I want to thanks. So I want to invite Alex Huffman, Dr. Alex Huffman, which is a bioaerosol scientist. He's at the College of Natural Science and Mathematics of the University of Denver. And Chia just talked about Alex being talking about, or soon to talk about some important things. So I'll let you start right away, Alex, with your presentation, and you're all set. So great, thanks.
Okay, thank you very much. It's great to be here. And so I am going to give a bit of an overview from kind of a high level of some of the things that we've already talked about. So you'll see some overlap between what Krystal and Chia said, but certainly talking about the aerosol side of these things. So I'm an aerosol scientist in the Department of Chemistry at the University of Denver. And so on the left, you can see the slide that was already shown by Chia, but the idea that when people are infected with some kind of a viral respiratory disease, they breathe out, those aerosols go into the room. And so there's a wide distribution of sizes, but as we talked about already, some of the smaller ones can be especially important because of the number that they're emitted in. They stay aloft in the room for a long time. They can be deposited in your lungs at high efficiency. So you saw in the last set of slides this concept that the smaller the aerosols are, the longer they stay in the room. I like to use this specific slide because it's one that Lindsay Marr actually sent to Dr. Fauci in July of 2020 to help convince him of the importance of aerosols. So there's some historical significance into this very screenshot. And so you can see that as the particles get smaller, the residence time of the room can be half an hour to hours long. And so it's really important to note that when we breathe out, those particles will be around for a long time. I want to pause just for a second. I meant to say this upon starting, but if you haven't been watching Amanda in the left, don't forget about watching her either. So I don't know how many minutes it's been now, but she's doing a great job and she's making a lot of progress. So it's a bit downside that by the time we're all done talking, she's going to be done and we won't be watching anymore. So anyway, she's doing a great job down there. Okay, so as Chia said, there's a whole breadth of processes within the body that make aerosols. And I'm not going to go through the details of this, just to say in the respiratory tract, different regions of the respiratory tract have different physical mechanisms that allow particles to be produced and then emitted into the air as you breathe out. And what that means is that there's a really wide size distribution of particles that are now in the air. Several orders of magnitude from this shows 4 orders of magnitude here. And so it's not important to know the details of this, just to say there's a lot of different sizes that go into the room that stay there. The smaller they are, the longer they stay. I'm also not going to be talking about masks so much here. The topic was more about ventilation and do-it-yourself filters and filtration, things like this. But as Chia said, masking is still a really, really important piece of this whole puzzle. It helps prevent the aerosols from coming out. It also helps prevent the aerosols from going in upon inhalation, but I'm just not going to focus on it much. And so you can see on this axis then the emission rate versus particle diameter, and this purple curve here shows a modeled curve of how many aerosols are being emitted, and then the dashed curve is how much is being deposited. Again, it doesn't matter so much the details, but once you put masks into play, that goes down and it prevents more of the aerosols from coming in. So fine. It's also important to note that breathing and speaking is a key driver of the aerosol emission. So there used to be this discussion, well, maybe it's mostly just coughing and sneezing. There's been plenty of evidence to suggest that while those processes produce aerosols, breathing and speaking are really dominating the amount of aerosol emissions. And so and another piece of that I don't want us to forget is that the loudness with which we speak or shout makes a big difference in how much comes out. And so this is one of several examples where you can see on this axis, this is how loud somebody is. And on this axis, how much we can reduce the risk by getting a little bit quieter, basically. So if you get quieter, then the risk reduces. So without getting into quantitative details, this is why singing and shouting in bars and things like this have extra risk associated with them. When we're louder, there's more aerosols that come out. And so I also want to highlight two key points here, which is the difference between the near field risk and the room level risk. Again, I'm not going to get into the details. This is a really high level short talk, but just to say this near field risk is if you're standing close to somebody, think of a smoker, you get a big plume of smoke hitting you in your face. And so it doesn't matter what's going on the other side of the room. If you're standing right next to them, you get a lot of aerosol that hits you. And so that's this direct exposure to the plume. And masks are especially critical in that zone to not only prevent the exhalation, but also help you reduce your exposure. In that space, ventilation hasn't had as much time to kick in. So ventilation and filtration is not as important. I'll say in a second that it still is. And CO2 monitoring is not as important. There's this room level background of what's going on, but then you have this big extra plume that hits you in the face. And so we have to think about staying away from each other a little bit, still cleaning up the air in the room. But if we're standing right next to somebody, it doesn't really matter what the rest of the room is doing if they're breathing in your face. And so that's what this near field exposure is. But this far field room level mixing is important, where ventilation and filtration really kick in and can start cleaning the airspace. And that's where we can model the buildup of the aerosol, and CO2 is especially important as a tracer for what's going on. But I like this slide on the left here from Hugo Ali's group, from him and others. It just came out a couple days ago, where he shows a modeled results where even in the nearest field, ventilation and filtration are actually surprisingly important, that it does help there. So I don't want to undermine the fact that ventilation and filtration are important even in this near field, but we have to have some awareness that if we get close to somebody, it doesn't matter so much what the ventilation is, you can still have risk. I am not going to talk a lot about the details of ventilation and filtration, but just to say a little bit, ventilation is when we're flushing out this indoor air and replacing it with outdoor air that, depending on what you're trying to get rid of, if you're trying to get rid of viral aerosol in the room, the outdoor air space, the air volume is going to be cleaner. And so we can do that by passive mechanisms with windows. We can have mechanical HVAC systems. There's various mechanisms for this. We want to increase the air exchange rate as high as possible. And this is usually measured in air exchanges per hour, And so 3 to 6 or more is better. And as Krystal said, putting in the best possible MERV filtration in your HVAC system helps this process out. I'm not going to talk about upper room germicidal UV, but it's another component in addition to filtration that can be useful to cleaning out the airspace. In terms of CO2 monitoring, you heard about it a little bit, and I'll just say just a few more words, which is to say, if you breathe out aerosols, but you also breathe out CO2. And so unless you have a flame or some source of combustion in the room, humans are generally the only source of CO2. And so if we measure the CO2 going up, we can assume that the aerosol is building up with it. And so CO2 is relatively cheap and easy to measure, whereas viral aerosols are much, much harder to measure. And so we can use the concentration of CO2 as a rough idea. It's a proxy for how well the ventilation is matched to the occupancy in the room. And so as you get higher and higher, it gets more and more risky. At about 800, you have something on the order of 1% of the air that you breathe in is rebreathed from somebody else's exhaled lungs. So, and as you go higher and higher, you can calculate how much more that is. And so there are some nuances to the details here that I don't have time to get into, but the concept of using a CO2 monitor can be really, really helpful. It's also important to note that CO2 will not respond to in-room filtration, because the filter takes out the particles, but not the CO2. And so that's just something to know. So this is just showing here some time series where you have windows constantly open, the CO2 is constantly below this red line, but then if you're intermittently opening and closing the windows, the CO2 can build up. And so it's a way of getting really real-time feedback on what's going on, as Sam was saying, and others. And so you can buy a non-dispersive infrared or NDIR sensor for something on the order of $200 and deploy these or take them with you. I've got one right here sitting in my office. And it's rising as I'm talking here. And if you use Twitter, use the hashtag COVIDCO2, and you can learn quite a bit there. Just briefly on HEPA filtration, there will be more talked about in a second, but there are do-it-yourself versions, as Amanda's building in the background here. There's one filter version. This is a set that I built for my child's kindergarten last year. In fact, I think Amanda did this one on the upper right. This is one of my favorites. This is the record player model, which is very creative. This is the Corsi Rosenthal box. A couple things to point out if you buy one. One, look for true HEPA filtration. Avoid ionization, plasma, electronic air cleaners with lots of words that you want to avoid. Attached UV on the back is not so helpful. Definitely avoid chemical cleaners like hydroxyl peroxide, ozone, things like this. Look for the word CADR, C-A-D-R, which means clean air delivery rate, which is effectively the efficiency of the filter times the flow rate. And so if it doesn't have a high CADR, it's not doing anything. And so you want high CADR, low noise, and ideally low purchase cost. You look for something about 2/3 the size of the area of the room in terms of CADR. Just keep in mind that the manufacturer specifications that they report are really going to only report what's on high. And oftentimes that's allowed and people turn it down. So there's some practical aspects of this. This is the same curve that Krystal showed a second ago, so I won't point it out, but it's important to say that the HEPA and MERV filters take out all particle sizes, as she said. And I just want to have this shout out to Marwa Zatari's great work that she pushes out on Twitter, which is to show the CADR versus the purchase and replacement cost of various different HEPA filter units. And this is a really, really useful resource. And she has the data that you can click to behind it as well. And it also colors it based on the sound volume of the unit. So that's a really nice resource. In all of this, I don't want to forget the fact that going outside can still be useful. This is one of the famous pictures from the 1918 epidemic. This is a graphic that Marwa put together after I said some things riffing off of what Dustin had said. Eating lunch indoors with no masks is like having a sea full of children who hold their bladders all morning. But then if you just send everybody in the lunchroom and take off their masks, it's a little bit like putting them all in a hot tub and letting them relieve themselves all at once. So just don't forget about the fact that masks are important. So if that's true, then eating indoors together is still a point of issue. So don't forget about that part. And if you are eating, whether as a child or someone else indoors, then that's where we really need to bump up the extra ventilation, put HEPA filters in those places and such. This is the last slide I'll show, is just to say there is tons of information to learn about this if you are interested in more. This is one resource. I put the QR code in the upper right, which is this is a resource that I've been upkeeping since July of last year with tons of media articles and infographics and Twitter threads and science articles and all sorts of stuff to keep up with the concepts related to the airborne spread and transmission and prevention of COVID and other infectious diseases. So with that, I will hand the floor back.
Thanks very much, Alex. Great presentation. Even if you finished with a crude image, an image worth 1,000 words, so we all get the message. We understand the bathtub example. Thanks very much. And by the way, you showed an example of the regular Corsi Rosenthal box, which was made by Amanda. Amanda has not taken the easiest design today. So you might have seen that she took a fan which was not in a box, in a square box coming from the Home Depot already prepared. So she prepared that on top of putting the rest. So you see it.
So yeah, I think this is a perfect time to kind of break down what I've done so far.
Yes,
so
and just a second, Amanda, just a second.
Oh, sorry.
I know Stephane Stojanovic is in the room right now. If you want to share with us your design on the chat, you can just share the design you prepared and the maybe even the small video with that you prepared, if you'd like. I just want to open on that while Amanda and I will explain where she are. So where she is. Go ahead, Amanda. Sorry.
Great. So what I've done is basically there was the original design for the American box with the box fan. And this is the part that you can do for both of them. So regardless of whether you're doing a box fan or a circular fan, you make the cube of filters. And it's just, yeah, you just tape them all together, make sure it's all sealed. You really want to make sure the arrows on the filters are pointing inwards, because that's the way the air is going to flow through. It's going to be pulled through the filter and then come out of the fan. And then I just used the cardboard from the box to make the bottom, which is great. And then this is where we did a lot of work to figure out if you don't have a box fan. And so what I've done is I've added this shroud to make sure that kind of the spots where the fan actually pulls the air in as opposed to pushing it out is just blocked. And that's a David Elfstrom contribution and a lot of people on Twitter. So I added the shroud. And so you can see it's just a box fan here. That's also from the box. And then with the circular fan, what I did was I took the circular fan, just traced it, cut out a circle in the box it came with, and then I cut out the back so there's access there, and then just kind of sealed it all together. With these fans, they're often, the controls are on the back of the fan, which is not super convenient, so I made a little door. So you can just reach in and control them and then close that up. And so now the only part I have to do next is to add the fan onto the filter cube, and then it's done.
Great, impressive, Amanda. You show it's simple, but you know how to do it, and that's what we want to do. So explain to everybody how it can be made with the proper way. Okay, so I will pass my presentation. I want to let the panel be able to talk. And Sam, I will give you the room in a second. So the only thing I want you to retain from my presentation is that the WHN is working and has worked and is working on checklists for safe school. So I checked quickly a preliminary checklist that can be done by everybody, from parents to teachers and it's a 2-pager, really simple. You can check whatever precautions your school is taking and see what's not taken as well. So that's it's a document which is in evolution. So that's the 3rd release that we want to do today, and there will be others coming. So stay tuned with that. So Sam, on that, it's why I asked Stephane Stojanovic just to share with us his awesome work is done. So he will share it on the chat on the left, and then Sam, I will let you go ahead with the panel. I want to let as much as possible time, and my presentation anyway, that's secondary compared to what we all heard before. That was absolutely great. Go ahead, Sam.
Thank you ever so much, Stephane. That's extremely gracious. We've put together a panel of people who've been doing the outreach work. The point of this presentation isn't just information. It's also hopefully to inspire the people in this room and the people who might see it online to start taking action using these filters as the tool, a tool. So we've got a few things that we want you to be thinking about, and a few things that we want you to do if you're prepared. And we also have a panel of people who've been busy doing them for the past few months, and they're available to ask any questions if there's anything that you're not sure about. The first thing I want to do, just to clear up one possible source of confusion, is just to share this slide with you, because and if Stephane or Marcus or any of the other designers want to pipe in here, it would be a good time. This is, can you see that screen there? Can you see the filters? That are lovely. So here are the different designs that we've been working on, just very quickly. They're probably appropriate for different spaces. So we have a single filter, one fan, and one filter strapped to the front. Very, very cheap, £30, $35, 35 euros, with a pretty decent CADA. We have Stephane's larger, more expensive, but also more powerful design, which comes with this the option of putting on, we're calling it a sock, to put over the top of the filter, so that you can use the filters to reflect some, to put what you want on, to play with it. This is a Doctor Who's TARDIS for a school maybe. But if you love a football club, or if you're part of a union, or if you're part of a church, or if you support gay rights, or if you're feeling patriotic that day, then you can put the design on it to reflect who your group is, hopefully to make this seem like a group effort, which is what it needs to be. This is the design that's come from Marcus in Switzerland. 2 panels with a fan, and this, Marcus is going to talk about this later, but these fans are being wheeled out of his car directly into a school. So these filters are already in schools in Switzerland. So amazing work, and we're starting to make this, to get the ball rolling in Europe. And this is my effort, my colossus of a fan. It's completely inappropriate. I have a small language academy, which with the maximum number of people we might have in it is sort of 6. And this filter is huge. It's more appropriate for a lunch hall with 100 children in it. But better safe than sorry. So I'm going to stop sharing there, and let's talk to. We have Amanda, who is also been leading outreach work in Canada. I've been helping in Spain, and I hope to talk to what's been going on about in England as well. And we have Marie Watts, who's been helping Amanda in Canada, and we have Marcus Leutweiler, who is our Swiss engineer, but who's also been doing fantastic outreach work with schools in Switzerland. So I think if there are any questions I think the first thing to do is to just have them come and tell their stories. So if we have sort of a minute and a half little presentations from those 4, myself included, I'll go at the end, and Amanda included as well. So you might just need to step away from the filter for a second, and you can hear what they've done. And if you might consider doing something similar yourself, then please ask. And today, what we might want you to do while you're thinking about it is, if you can think of any spaces in your neighborhood that might need one of these filters, pop it in the chat. Not the name, not that we don't want to name any private business or anything, but just, my local bar, my child's dance class. You might be the owner or the controller of one of these spaces. If we have any business managers or owners here, would you be willing to put one of these filters in your space to make it feel safer for the people who use it? We will have, if we don't have already, we certainly will have in the next couple of days, a wish list, a sort of Amazon wish list. So if you want to buy the components to build one of these fans, tell us where you're from, and we can tell you exactly what to buy. So you can start the construction. I built one the other day, and if I can do it, then absolutely anyone on the planet can build one of these things. So Amanda, I wonder if you want to go first, if you want to tell us what you've done in Canada to try and get these boxes where they need to be.
Well, I think we faced a lot of the barriers that a lot of other places have. And I think working with our international group, we've heard the same story everywhere, that when governments don't acknowledge airborne transmission, it's really hard to get any funding or support for mitigating airborne transmission, even if a lot of people know that it's real. And so we've had to do a lot of work I'm based in Alberta, Canada. And so we've had to do a lot of work on what I call the 2 streams of working with systemic factors and trying to lobby school boards and governments. And then the other way is what I call the JDI, the just do it approach. And so we've had a lot of success with people who find a champion teacher, someone who really gets it and says, I'm going to put one of these in my kid's class. And So we kind of are doing both because we've faced in Canada a lot of all persecution of people who want to wear N95s or who want to mitigate airborne transmission. And I think it's about looking at all of the opportunities, and we've had businesses that put them in their business space, and it's very similar to Sam's story about the CO2 monitor, and people just ask about it, and it's an opportunity to learn. And Marie had a really great success in the community too, so I'll pass it over to her.
Sure. So I won't turn on my camera because it was a bit glitchy. So I'm here in Alberta, Canada, and my background is in health research and policy, so I was following along with the research. I actually built my first box fan filter box this summer because we had a lot of wildfire smoke. So then when my child was going to go back to their dance, after school dance, I contacted the head of the dance school to see if they were doing anything for ventilation or filtration. And she had been looking at buying like HEPA filter units, and she'd been looking at $600 units that she was going to spring for each room. But I started feeding her information on cater and that sort of thing, and she realized that the units that she was looking at wouldn't meet the requirements for the size of the room. She would need 2 of those for every room, and then that just gets way too expensive. So when she realized that I had done a lot of research on this, she sort of just left it to me, and I pointed out that she would probably be best served to go with the Corsi Rosenthal cubes, because then they have the capacity that she would just need 1 for the room, and they only cost $130 each here in Canada. So she could basically do the whole school for the price of one of those other filters. Mm-hmm. So I made about, I don't know, 8 or so boxes. They had a gymnasium too as part of it, and so we put 3 in the gym. They were really easy to build, as you've seen Amanda do. All the supplies I just bought from the local hardware store. So then the next thing as I did, I contacted my kid's school to see if I could also bring in some, at least for the music room. And I found out that the central administration has a policy against that. And the rationale was that the ventilation of the school already meets the standards required, so nothing additional is necessary. But also they were concerned about oversight, that they didn't want parents dropping off random things and the teacher would have no idea if it was safe or if it was effective. So they basically just said they put a stop on it. And in fact, one school, they had bought, the parents group had bought a HEPA filter for every classroom, and they had them up and running. But when the central administration found out about it, they had to remove all those filters from the school. So that's sort of where we're at here in terms of trying to get additional filtration into the schools.
Mm-hmm. There was a story from Canada, if I'm not wrong, about someone whose school turned them away, and so they went and took them to the dance school instead. So the children still got the protection from the boxes that the parents had built, which I think is a good way of improvising. Lovely. Marcus, do you want to tell us about the relationship with this school in Switzerland?
Sure. We started like 2 months ago together with the other team members, exchanging ideas and figuring out first how to get filters which are comparable to the ones they're using in the US. And then fans as well. Box fans are not widely available in Europe. And then how to construct this whole thing together. We figured it out with lots of trial and error, and also measuring. So proving that this model works, that it reduces aerosols. We were successful with that. And then we had this private school called Zurich International School, which was very interested in having in all their school rooms self-built filters. And we basically, yesterday, we delivered the first 2, and now they're looking at having 80 to 100 more to build with their kids. So the best is probably I just share the story of how we built those yesterday and delivered them. Probably the most interesting ones, or maybe some background also about our. Let's see, Chrome tab. You should see. Whoops.
Yes, that's better. We see your screen now.
All right, that's just what we are. Make human technology. We want to help people understand technology. We started with CO2 sensors, now air cleaners and other stuff. We are an association. Let's see now. Let's stop this. Now let's go to the other tab.
Let me go there.
Other tab.
Hello, everyone. I apologize for interrupting, but we have a couple of the speakers from the other session who are actually in this room.
Okay, I see Steve. Okay.
Natalie and Stephen. Okay, Stephen is now there.
Now in this room, I see Charlotte and Amy.
Okay, I guess
I think we
Carry on.
Okay, we're back. Go ahead, Marcus. I think it's the problem is solved.
All right, no problem. So yeah, I'll just take you along with the ride. That was yesterday where we built and delivered. So let's see, where can we start? We got all the parts: wood, filters, fans, wheels, filters, assembling the tools that are needed to actually build parts. So it was all very in a small room. So here we are assembling the box, putting in the filters, as you can see in a V shape, and then isolation that it's airtight. Let's see, where are we? Putting on wheels to the box, putting in the fan, and then those are the finished ones, two of them. Put them in the car, drive to the school, getting them out of the car because they're quite big, and then into the school. And now you can see them in the school, in their makerspace actually. And they said, yeah, maybe we can also build some of our own design in the makerspace based on your design. But first we want to just get the kits from you and then assemble them with our kits.
How did you build the relationship with the school, Marcus? Why did
they approached us, I think, or the other way around. I don't even remember. And they are interested in a partnership. And since all the designs that we do are open source and we are fully transparent, we open the box, we show how it works. We say, you can build this box yourself if you like. You can change it around, you can paint it, it doesn't matter. So it's like a give and take partnership between a school that can use it and a school that understands that putting in filters that the kids build themselves is different than you just buy something. So they understand, I can learn what are aerosols, how it works, how are filters, how do they work? What's the concept behind? How can you design and build a box, which is basically a wooden box, which is, I would say this box almost looks like a piece of furniture on wheels.
Yeah.
But it cleans air.
So
may
I ask a question?
Go ahead.
My name is I'm Carlos from Chile. I'd like to know, how could you manage the narrative so that this doesn't give a false sense of security? Because at least here in Chile, every time we do something to help mitigate the increasing cases, the people in the office, they say, oh, now we got filters. Okay, masks off. And let's gather all around. We're safe. Okay, everybody got to come in. So I don't want to encourage people to behave badly because we got filters. That's it. So have you thought about a narrative or something, mostly in schools, to teach them this is part of the solution, is not the solution. We have to keep using masks, social distancing, and everything has to be in place. This doesn't replace security. It helps.
Absolutely. I mean, I would go back to what Alex was saying during his presentation about the importance of distance and masks, as well as good ventilation. There's no shortcut apart from just explaining it. This is another layer, not a replacement layer. The Swiss cheese model, yes. The road safety model. We don't give up with speed limits just because we've got seatbelts, do we? Etc. We don't take the brakes out of the car because we've got airbags. It's and so on. Lovely. So just to start to finish up, I mean, if there are any questions from people who are perhaps thinking about considering doing this outreach work for the panel, then now would be the time. And the other thing, just before anyone puts their hand up, is sorry, I'm a school teacher. Is on Thursday, next Thursday, we're going to be having our weekly team meeting on the main OEA system in one of the public rooms. If you would like to come to that, then I think we're going to be doing a dedicated session for new people and people who are interested in building teams in their areas. And if you are interested, that would be a great first stop, apart from talking to us now. So if there's any more questions?
Nope.
I want to say as well that we have still Alex from the presentation at the beginning, and as we said earlier, it can be questions related to the initial presentations, indeed, or anyway, anything from the panels, insights, up to the very first presentation. So don't hesitate. If not, we'll try anyway to aggregate the presentation in some place at the WHN summit that will be allowing people to get back to this presentation. But in the meantime, don't hesitate. Any questions? There's always good questions and answers. We try to respond. But Alex is there. I think Chia and Krystal needed to jump off. Kia, indeed, it's 5 a.m. still in Taiwan. So, okay. So for the go ahead if you have questions.
Good. No, I'm not. I think just one thing to add would be that in the United Kingdom, they've had very good success in involving trade unions in this idea. You can see why this would be a logical step for a trade union to take, something that they would be interested in, because the health and safety of their members in their workplaces is a key part of their reason for being, and their health and safety. They have health and safety representatives in the workplaces that they represent, and the idea that these filters might help make those places safer is an easy thing for them to understand. So that's another outreach possibility that we've been exploring. Next, yeah. So if anybody wants to talk to us, we're here.
I can just share my last screen of the presentation I was to make, which is going directly in what we were just discussing before. So whatever we suggested today as a group was one of the layers of the Swiss cheese that Amanda just pointed out and Sam earlier, and talking about the hierarchy of controls, which I presented in the preliminary session. So filtration and ventilation are here. So this is the most effective to the least effective. It's important to understand not efficient or not efficient. So PPE is efficient, but effectiveness here is the cost to put that in place. So it's much cheaper for a society, for a school, to put filtration in place than to have masks for everybody. It's important to have the two, but since we already have agreed many, not everywhere, many places, quite some of them are losing it right now, but to put masks, why not do something which is more cost effective, like filtration or ventilation? So that's the point here. Okay, so this is this is why we're trying to work hard to make sure that this is an option, and this is another of the layers that are required here. And anyway, ventilation and filtration were good even before the pandemic. So we need to improve air quality in schools. It's known, it has been validated by studies well before this pandemic. So why not trying to achieve at least a portion of what was needed with commercial units or DIY unit when it's not possible to have the money to go for the commercial version. So this is what I wanted to just to highlight. The only thing I wanted to share, by the way. And for those who have not maybe seen it, Stephane, you shared your 3D animated design of the UK, the last version, the new release of the design of the UK version of the air cleaner. So just wanted to, it will probably be amongst the things we'll share with the presentation. Just wanted to say that as well. So other items, questions, comments, remarks, whatever. Still time before we'll keep closing it. So, and Amanda, you did absolutely great. You amongst us, you were the one which had been in the time. So that was you. So you saved us all. Great, thanks, Amanda.
When you have a small little kid running around, usually when you're building those, you do it really fast, and so that just shows how easy it is.
You're used to do that. Yeah, great job. Thanks, Sam, for the panel. Great insights. And thanks for the panelists as well as speakers. It was a pleasure exchanging with you today. So sorry we had to change the room because we had a kind of art stuff, and that definitely we need to let the others talk about theirs. There are many other sessions, by the way, up to tomorrow afternoon. Afternoon, I would say North American time, but this is up to tomorrow morning. So for those who are in Europe, and even earlier than that for those around the Pacific on the other side. So, so thanks very much to all. Great participation, and it was a pleasure.